Nearly a month ago I set up the ropefish jungle, and although I really love this tank, there's one problem. It's standing on the floor. So to lift this tank up from the floor as well as make space for another one underneath, I'll be making a new stand. Now I only made a single very crude sketch before I started building, but honestly that's all we need. On the previous few stands that I made, I went for a design like this, with two vertical beams. A bigger one that'll be carrying all of the weight, and a smaller one that's just there as kind of a guide to keep everything aligned. And I'd say this is probably the best solution for any kind of stand, but you guessed it, today's the exception. I've stated before that I don't intend on keeping these ropefish in here long term, and once I move these guys over to their final tank, I have something really cool planned out to do with this tank. Without spoiling too much, I plan on doing an open top design with a lot of plants bursting out. And to best accommodate a look like that, you need a really clean looking stand. And thus the design from before won't really work this time. So what are we going to make? It's actually really simple. We're going to start off with building a frame that'll hold the ropefish aquarium. Next we'll attach some legs underneath that'll lift the tank up off the floor. On its own, a stand like this is not secure enough to hold an aquarium. But by adding another shelf and supporting this with its own set of legs, we'll get a pretty secure stand that can hold 2 aquariums. But let's get to the workshop and start cutting the necessary pieces. I've been experimenting with ways I can hide the screws. I figured if I pre-drill the start of each hole with a bigger drill bit, add the screw and then plug the hole with a small dowel, I can achieve a pretty clean look. After finishing the top shelf, I cut all the remaining boards and repeated the same steps as before to build a slightly smaller second shelf. Oh yeah, I also added a second board against the back of both frames. In order to accommodate for a filtration system, the entire stand will be a few centimeters deeper than the tanks it will hold. And this board is just there to make sure each and every side of the tank is supported. And with all the pieces ready to go, it's now time to make it all come together. I marked for and drilled matching holes on both the top frame and its legs. I added more dowels in these to help everything align properly. Once I got all of the legs in place, I turned the whole structure over and hammered down on it from the top. I decided to go for a little bit extra security and added these extra long screws in as well. It's still a bit wonky at this point, but we'll fix that by adding the lower shelf. Once again, I hit all the screws with a couple of dowels. The only screws that will remain visible are the ones connecting the smaller legs to the bigger ones. And all of this makes the whole structure super stable. Next I cut up a few pieces of plywood and glued the first one in place. While the glue dried, I decided to start sanding the entire thing. Next I glued on the other piece and started doing some detail work. Now I don't know about you guys, but I'm not really a big fan of the exposed plywood edge. I decided to cover it up with a small wooden board. Next I added a stain to make it match with the rest of the animal room, and then added a layer of varnish to help protect the wood. After all that had dried, it was just a case of moving the stand into the animal room and installing the ropefish aquarium up top. I didn't record any of that, but I think you'll get the idea. Having this aquarium up on the stand really makes it look so much better, and I think this stand turned out amazing. My favorite part about the stand is the little trim boards along the edges. It really helps make this stand look more premium, especially on the bottom shelf. I knew I wanted to do this and thus pushed back the lower shelf a little bit to make sure the trim boards would line up with the outer legs. But that'll have to do for this week's video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you're hungry for more content, I recommend you watch this video next to see how we set up the ropefish jungle. I'll see you there.